आपके घर में फिनेस्टा नहीं है तो कॉल कीजिए।
Find Finer Finesta.
Days after Trump attacks Venezuela,
My direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela.
Fast-moving situation.
world on tenterhooks again.
To stick to principle.
Uncertainty, the new reality. Trump rips up the rules. Global order in flux. What are the top risks of 2026? Top risk guru Ian Bremmer speaks to Rahul Kanwal.
What are the top risks that you should be looking out for as you plan 2026? And what are the most likely red herrings? Things that most people anticipate will happen but actually are unlikely to happen. The Global Risk Report has just been put out a few hours before now. And in a short while from now, we'll be going across live to New York, where top global risk guru Ian Bremmer will join us live on NDTV to talk about the risks that you should be looking out for as you plan this year. Before we get started, let me take you through the headlines we're tracking this evening. Congress leader Prithviraj Chavan triggers controversy, asks if Donald Trump might kidnap India's Prime Minister like he did in Venezuela. The BJP hits back. Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University back in the national glare. Left students raise a Kabar Khudegi slogan against the Prime Minister. Delhi police orders a probe. Big blow to the TMK government in Tamil Nadu. Madurai bench of the Madras High Court allows Deepam to be lit on the hilltop. DMK says it will approach the Supreme Court. Trouble mounts for Vijay's final film, Jan Nayagan, yet to receive a censor board certification. Film is slated to release on the 9th of January. European leaders push back on Trump's threat to take over Greenland. In a joint statement, they say the Arctic island belongs only to its people. US President Donald Trump has said that the United States is not at war with Venezuela and will not push for immediate elections. This comes days after a dramatic US military raid captured now deposed President Nicolas Maduro. Trump says Venezuela must first be stabilized and rebuilt, with US oil companies playing a central role. Here's more.
Shots were fired late Monday near Venezuela's presidential palace. Social media videos showed what appeared to be tracer bullets fired into the sky. This was hours after Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, was sworn in as interim president. Maduro's son broke down as Delcy Rodriguez took charge.
Hiciste de todos nosotros en la familia gente fuerte. Aquí estamos, cumpliendo hasta que regrese. La patria está en buenas manos, papá. Y pronto nos vamos a abrazar aquí en Venezuela.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has ruled out any immediate political transition in Venezuela, saying the country is in no condition to hold elections following the capture of Nicolas Maduro. Asked who is currently in charge, Trump offered a one-word response.
We're dealing with the people. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in.
Trump has insisted the United States is not at war with Venezuela.
I think it's just going to fall. I don't think we need any action. It looks like it's going down. It's going down for the count. You ever watch a fight?
I have.
They go down for the count.
Trump has confirmed that interim President Delcy Rodriguez has been cooperating with US officials, but denied any prior coordination before Maduro's removal. He said a decision on whether sanctions against Rodriguez will remain is expected soon. The American president also warned that the United States is prepared for a second military incursion if cooperation breaks down. Maduro, meanwhile, has been indicted in the United States on charges including narco-terrorism and cocaine trafficking conspiracy. The US president has blamed Venezuela's collapse on its leadership, accusing it of exporting crime and instability. NDTV Bureau Report.
Not satisfied with just Venezuela, Trump is now eyeing Greenland. His threats have rattled Denmark and have put NATO unity under a massive question mark. Here's a closer look at why Greenland is back in the global spotlight and what this could mean for alliances that have held firm for decades.
A fresh chill is sweeping through Europe these days, and it's not just the winter cold. Unease is growing in Denmark after US President Donald Trump once again floated the idea of an American takeover of Greenland, just a day after a dramatic US military operation in Venezuela. Denmark administers Greenland, a vast, mineral-rich Arctic territory that has become strategically critical amid growing global competition. Denmark's PM, Mette Frederiksen, has hit back firmly, saying the US has no right to annex Greenland, and reminded Washington that Denmark already grants extensive US military access under NATO security agreements. The question is, to what extent would NATO allies really support Denmark if this became more than words? Some countries may value good relations with Washington more than defending Denmark. Denmark is a founding member of NATO, and experts warn a US move against a fellow ally would shatter the bloc.
Well, in case of a US military invasion of Greenland, which I think is unlikely still, in that scenario though, the NATO alliance would, in reality, de facto cease to exist.
On the streets, disbelief is turning into anger.
Jeg synes det fuldstændig vanvittigt. Det uforskammet faktisk.
The backdrop is crucial. Trump's comments follow the US operation that removed Nicolas Maduro, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio defending America's expanding role in the Western Hemisphere. From Caracas to Copenhagen, from Latin America to the Arctic, Trump's revival of old doctrines is sending shockwaves through allies and adversaries alike. Vishal Vivek for NDTV World.
Before we get started with this report, I want to take a look at this special report on the Delta Force, the Special Forces wing of the United States Armed Forces, which really abducted Maduro and his wife while the world was half asleep.
In the shadows of America's defense stands one of the most elite units in the world, Delta Force. Officially known as the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, this secretive US Army unit was founded in 1977 by Colonel Charles Beckwith, inspired by the British SAS, to combat the rising threat of global terror. Delta operators are the best of the best, hand-selected from Rangers, Green Berets and beyond. They undergo grueling training in counter-terrorism, hostage rescue, direct action raids, and high-value target captures. From the intense Battle of Mogadishu in 1993, immortalized in Black Hawk Down, where Delta snipers earned medals of honor defending downed pilots, to the raid that eliminated the ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2019. And most recently, the capture of the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro in Caracas during Operation Absolute Resolve, along with countless classified missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond. Delta Force operates under the Joint Special Operations Command, striking swiftly and silently when ordered to deploy. They are the tip of the spear, unseen, often unstoppable, and some say without equal, America's ultimate shadow warriors. Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
One of the things people think about a lot at the start of every year is, what are the risks that are likely to impact the world around me? 2026 started out in extremely dramatic fashion, with US Special Forces sweeping into Venezuela to kidnap President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. What are the other bombshells that you need to keep an eye out for as you plan this year? And what are the potential red herrings, things that most people imagine are going to happen but are probably not? I'm joined on this special broadcast live from New York by top global risk guru Ian Bremmer. For 2 decades, Bremmer's Eurasia group has put out this top 10 global risk report. The study is widely tracked because it gives a forewarning on trends and things that you should be looking out for on the global stage. This is what Bremmer and his team do for a living. They anticipate risk and they tell the world about things that they should be looking out for. Bremmer is often right, which is why his reports are taken seriously across the world. Ian Bremmer, welcome to NDTV. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you.
It's not been a very happy new year for President Maduro. Did you have to rewrite large parts of the report between the time your team probably took a break for Christmas and came back right after New Year? A lot had already happened.
Yeah, we had the Donroe Doctrine was already a risk on Friday, and this for the first time ever. What we did is we actually took a big paragraph on Venezuela from the Friday draft, and we showed everyone. We put that in the Monday report, and we put it right next to the edited, the rewritten one, so they could kind of see our work, see what we were saying before the invasion and the extraction of Maduro and after. But either way. The Donroe Doctrine is towards the top of our list because the United States is, of course, ripping up its own previous global order, changing the rules on other countries around the world as we speak.
So let's spend some time on the Donroe Doctrine. This comes, of course, from the Monroe Doctrine, except he's putting it into force very quickly, focusing a lot on the Americas. Explain what the theory of the Donroe Doctrine was and how it's already being implemented in Venezuela and what it could potentially mean for countries like Cuba and the others.
Well, the idea is that America's backyard is a priority in the United States, not only keeping other countries out, but being able to determine outcomes that it wants, primarily, but not exclusively militarily. That is not the extent of American ambitions. It does not reflect American isolationism in other parts of the world. The U.S. just concluded its largest ever military sale to Taiwan, and there's all sorts of engagement with Israel about potential strikes in Iran and other such issues. Also, the Western Hemisphere is defined in a Trumpian way. It doesn't just include Canada and Latin America, but also Greenland, which isn't part of the Western Hemisphere, but it is a part of the Donroe Doctrine, and Trump intends to have American sovereignty over Greenland, which is a part of Denmark, of course, a NATO ally of the United States. And, part of this is an extension of America First policies into foreign policy. Part of it is a recognition that the tariffs that were the principal tool to project U.S. power in 2025 now have less force in 2026. Trump is underwater on the economy with his own voters. He has challenges on affordability and inflation with the midterm election coming up. The Chinese pushed back hard, and Trump had to back down as a consequence because he needs China as much as China needs him. So he's now focused in an area where he has a lot more power, which is the military. And he certainly displayed with quite enormous success in Venezuela that he's not only willing to use it, but he's capable of using it for outcomes that he wants.
So let's start right at the top. The first risk that you talk about in your risk report is the fear of a political revolution in the United States. Now, political revolution, one would expect, say, in a place like Iran. I can think of a few other geographies where this is likely. You're essentially telling everyone watching NDTV and reading your report that the main risk that you anticipate is one of a political revolution in the United States. Explain, Ian, to our viewers, what does this political revolution look like? How does it play out through 2026?
So it's not the fear. It's the reality that there is a political revolution underway in the United States that Trump is leading. That is not to say that it will be successful, but it is in process. And the belief is that President Trump sees that the U.S. political system, his view, was weaponized by the Democrats against him and led to an unprecedented 2 impeachments, and unprecedented felony charges and convictions, and sadly precedented near assassination. And he considers, on the basis of that, that the principal enemy of the United States and of President Trump himself, of course, is not the Russians, not the Chinese, not the Iranians, not the North Koreans, but is inside the United States. It's the Democratic opposition. And that as a consequence of that, he must with urgency weaponize the power ministries in the U.S., the Department of Justice, the FBI, the IRS, others. He must control and politicize the administrative state, and he must break the checks and balances on executive authority of the American president before 2028. That is urgent, because otherwise he and his family and others are going to be going to jail. And so that is the political revolution that is underway in the United States. And as we see over the last year, the efforts that President Trump has made to ensure that weaponization and politicization of the U.S. political process is far greater than any observers had expected at the beginning of 2025. And the resistance has been more spotty and less strong than any observers would have expected in 2025. So that is, and of course, because the United States is the most powerful country in the world, a political revolution in the U.S. is a pretty big deal.
I'll switch sequence and I'll come to the third risk, which really deals with the Monroe Doctrine and what's happened in Venezuela. Everyone watching at this time wondering, he's gone in, he's pulled the president out. In your view, Ian, what happens next in Venezuela? How does this play out from you?
Well, there was enormous and successful planning over the last 6 months of these strikes on Venezuela. Not only did they get Maduro out into the United States, where he's now in my own city, New York City, just a few blocks away facing justice, but not a single American serviceman or woman was killed in the military operation. So it was staggeringly successful. No other country could have pulled it off. But there's no plans for governing Venezuela. And this was not regime change. It's regime roulette. You know, spin the dice and see what's next, because Maduro's been removed, but everyone else is still there. And you saw that Trump said that he's going to run Venezuela, but he doesn't mean he's going to run Venezuela. He means that the U.S. has shown that they have military capability to run Venezuela, because if the Venezuelan government doesn't do what they want, and what they want includes ending relations with Russia and Iran and Hezbollah and Cuba, and providing access, preferred access to the U.S. corporations to Venezuelan oil and critical minerals, and stopping the drug export and transit, and maybe includes democratic elections down the road, but that's not a priority for Trump, certainly. It is for Marco Rubio. That if the Venezuelan government doesn't do that, then the U.S. will take military action against them the way they just did against Maduro. So that's the plan. It's not much of a plan in terms of governance. And now Trump is looking at other countries in the region, and he's saying, well, maybe I'll engage in strikes against some of the drug facilities in Colombia or Mexico.
And Cuba, they're talking about how they expect the regime in Cuba to change as well. Do you see that as being likely? Does this extend to other countries in Latin America now, Ian?
Again, not just Cuba, but I think that President Trump wants sovereignty over Greenland. So this is absolutely a feeling that the United States can redraw the map.
Is that posturing, or do you think a few weeks, months later, we'll have you back on this conversation discussing how they just went in? And because, you know, there aren't those many people in Greenland, and who do you get out? So here, you've created a villain out of Maduro, you pulled him out, you look like a macho He-Man with the success of your special forces. In Greenland, who do you get out? It's a lot of barren land.
No. There's no boots on the ground in Greenland. There's no plan for invasion, but there is a plan or excuse me, there is an intention for the United States to take Greenland, that Trump wants Greenland to no longer belong to Denmark. He wants it to belong to the United States, and he wants some form of agreement directly between the U.S. and the Greenlanders. And he has instructed his administration to come up with that plan. Now, will that be successful? Will they execute on it? How long will they take? I have no idea, because Trump has no idea. But that is the state of play as of right now.
You're cracking me up, and this is not a stand-up comedy show. It's a very serious discussion on global risk, but that's the reality of the situation that we face. So you think at some point in time this year, what probability would you assign to the fact that Trump orders some kind of a military operation on Greenland?
Zero. It's not, I think that there's, never say zero, 2%, 1%. It's not about military strikes. But I think that there is absolutely going to be political and economic effort and perhaps military pressure, and some will be overt and some will be covert. There might be information campaigns, the rest.
No, but we're seeing the Prime Minister of Denmark push back. We've seen NATO countries push back. The E3 very clearly, firmly push back. France, the United Kingdom, Germany, they're also pushing back. Will Europe be able to stand up in favor of Germany, or when Trump goes in, he just goes in and everybody just has to back off?
In favor of Greenland, you mean, not Germany? Yes, they are finally taking it seriously. And I'm glad they are. They should have taken it seriously months ago. They've seen statements by Stephen Miller. They've certainly recognized the Trump administration is not interested in negotiating directly with them, because the funny thing here, and this is the Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass part of this, is that if Trump wants more security access, basing rights, intelligence stations, if he wants access for resource exploitation, all of those things the Denmark government would be willing to negotiate with it. The only thing that they are not prepared to negotiate is the territorial integrity of Denmark. And Trump is not interested in negotiating with Denmark. So that's the problem, right? Is that the Dawn Road Doctrine is not about a negotiated settlement. It's about America getting the way it wants, when it wants it, unilaterally, and especially against adversaries or friends that Trump believes are too weak to stand up to him.
How do you think
China can stand up to it?
China is likely to decode what's happened in Venezuela, the noises being made on Greenland? How does this impact China's calculus on Taiwan?
Not at all, because China's calculus on Taiwan was never being made because of America standing up for international law. China's calculus on Taiwan was made because Taiwan is an island. It is very well defended. It has critical economic and technological capabilities the Chinese need. So a military effort against Taiwan would be an unacceptable, damaging risk for the Chinese Communist Party. That's why they haven't made that move. Remember, Taiwan is not considered an international issue. It's not a foreign policy for China. China considers Taiwan a domestic political issue. So they're not responding to what the Americans are doing in Venezuela.
Do you at all think it's likely that China makes some moves on Taiwan beyond the military, economic, coercive steps that we've seen, the fighter jets whizzing in the air? Does it stay in this realm, or does it go one step further?
The risk report we put out every year is for the year. So if this were a 5-year report and we were talking about 2030, Taiwan would be on the list. But for 2026, it's not on the list. In fact, U.S.-China relations are a red herring this year. Trump is excited about, looking forward to his trip in April to Beijing to meet with President Xi. President Xi will reciprocate and travel to the United States later in the year. They are looking at engaging more on soybeans and semiconductors and other things. And on Taiwan, the Japanese made their tough statements on Taiwan, and the Americans called Takaichi Sanai, the new prime minister, and said you should really cool it down a little bit. So we don't think Taiwan is a significant risk this year.
One of the risks you talk about, which is your second risk, is overpowered. The fact that you've got two very different approaches, America betting on the petro economy, China going the EV way, and their different approaches to artificial intelligence. How do you see that risk play out through the year, and which of the two approaches at the end of the year do you think is more likely to have come out to be the right approach?
Yeah, this is, I think, really underappreciated. The fact that the United States, of course, is really betting heavily on oil, gas, and coal. The U.S. is the biggest producer in the world of oil, 13.5 million barrels a day. It is an extraordinary petro state and is exporting a lot. There are, with Venezuela, Trump is not talking about democracy, but he's talking a lot about getting the oil. Now, it's going to take a long time before companies are going to invest and get a lot more out, but that is the orientation. While Trump has described renewable energy as woke climate policy, and he's clawing back American industrial policy to try to support post-carbon energy. Now, the Chinese are the biggest fossil fuel users in the world, and they're building out more coal, but they're also building out unprecedented amounts of nuclear and wind and solar and the batteries to support that and the supply chains to support that. And, fossil fuels are a 20th century energy, and they're not getting cheaper. And post-carbon energy is a 21st century energy, and technology is making it cheaper every day. And so now China has become an electro state, and they're behind the U.S. on AI, but they're way ahead of the U.S. on powering AI. And the Chinese are making a bet that the ability to power and drive your infrastructure and export that to the world is a much better bet than having slightly better AI that you can't actually power. And I fear that this is a huge battle that the Chinese are winning, and the Americans are only fighting with one hand, and not even their strongest hand long term.
I want to come to the fifth report risk that you mentioned. This is about Russia's second front. You talk about the possibility of more action between NATO and Russia, and the fact that it's not just restricted any longer to Ukraine, that even though if it's not a military offensive, but still there is more happening between Russia and NATO. So explain what you think is most likely to happen, and more importantly, how does NATO respond? Because I was reading that report where you think this is the year where NATO really pushes back. Is that hope, or there's more to your assessment than just hope?
There's a question of whether it would be NATO collectively, whether the U.S. would support it, but certainly NATO countries today, particularly frontline countries, the Poles, the Baltics, the Nordics, they are increasingly on the receiving end of very significant and escalating Russian asymmetric warfare. You just saw this past weekend, that there was the Finns detained a Russian ship that was dragging anchor to disrupt fiber cables that were in the water. We've seen drones fly into Poland and Romania, weather balloons from Russia fly into Lithuania. We've seen drones disrupting airports. We've seen telegram payments from Russia going to individuals all over these countries to support vandalism and espionage and efforts to destroy critical infrastructure, even an effort to assassinate the CEO of the largest defense company in Germany. And NATO hasn't really responded to that. So now we see NATO countries talking about whether they would do offensive cyber operations against the Russians, whether they would send counter drones, whether they would send jet fighters to scramble in closer proximity to the Russians, military exercises in areas where the Russians are more lightly defended, all of that. And, the Russia-Ukraine war now, Rahul, has gone on for almost 4 years. And the Russians are losing a lot of people, and the Ukrainians are having a harder time defending. But, the markets have priced in the Russia-Ukraine war The fact is that there is an asymmetrical war going on between Russia and the frontline NATO states, and if that expands, that is going to be far more dangerous. So that is what we think is the significant risk happening at a time that the Russians see that the Europeans are spending a lot of money on the war and on Ukraine, and the Russians want them to stop. The only way they stop is by breaking up NATO, breaking up Europe, and Trump is giving them more of an opportunity to do that. So that's where we see the escalation.
If Trump acts against Greenland, would that be the end of NATO? Or will they just stay with the alliance in the hope that you actually need America to ward off Russia?
Well, it's kind of interesting you asked that right after the Russia question, because, of course, if Trump were to invade NATO and seize it, that would be the end of NATO. But if Trump engages in a covert campaign to work with Greenland and try to convert Greenlanders to support the U.S., inducing them with money, but also political influence, if he has a more asymmetrical gray campaign the way the Russians might, for example, in frontline countries in NATO or in Moldova or in Georgia, it's very hard for the Europeans to say that's a bright red line, now we're leaving NATO. So, Trump is not going to make this easy for the Europeans at all.
Your last risk is the water weapon, and this is particularly important for a country like India, where we've seen a lot of pushback on the Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan. Explain how you see water being weaponized more than what we've seen in previous years, and the implications this has in the Indian context.
Look, it's number 10. So, of the risks, it's the lowest urgency and likelihood and impact. But it is mattering more than it has in the past. And of course, the suspension of the Indus Treaty between India and Pakistan is one of the contributing reasons for that. The challenges the Americans and the Mexicans are having together, this is all over the world. It's not just developing countries. The Horn of Africa, of course, the Sahel and the lack of water also leading to more radicalization in the region. Water is being more weaponized, and water is also increasingly scarce. And, you really can't talk about an economy without water. And the fact that 2 billion people on the planet are water stressed for more than 1 month a year, and it's hitting, countries all over the world, means that conflicts about water are increasingly spilling over into geopolitical conflicts, and it's being weaponized by countries in these regions.
You talk about this being the drone age, and I found fascinating in your report a mention of how drug cartels in Latin America are actually sending their troops to fight in Ukraine, not so much to help Ukraine, but basically to understand how drone warfare happens so they can then take it back. And even jihadists are doing the same, and they're trying to figure out how to use these drones. What implications might that have across the world this year?
Yeah, the Ukrainians produced 3.5 million drones in the last year, and they're using them, and they are world-class in those capabilities. The Russians are stepping up their capabilities as well with the support of Chinese critical minerals, by the way. And they're exporting that know-how and that expertise and that training and the data and the AI that's run on them. We've seen them now used in Brazil. We're seeing them used in the drug wars by the criminals in Brazil, criminal gangs. We've seen them used by drug cartels in Colombia and Mexico, and those numbers are going way up. So, obviously, this is a risk. It's a risk not just for governments, but also from non-state actors. And we expect that the defenses, which will be created, but right now, this is an easy offensive environment to expand.
Your 8th risk is around artificial intelligence. Your headline is AI eats its users. How do you see all the trends, and there's so much noise about this being an AI bubble, how to the extent to which artificial intelligence technologies actually play out in the context of this also being a geopolitical risk?
Look, we're huge believers in AI as a revolutionary technology that is increasing productivity in every sector. It's leading to great inventions. It is improving productivity. And it is allowing the humans to have a shot of hitting sustainable development goals that we've been failing on. So these are hugely important things. But the valuations of some key American AI companies are incredibly high. The money that's being spent is in the trillions, and those investors want a return. And to get a return, they're going to need to start commercializing that AI. And particularly the AI that is working with consumers and voters, right? They are being injected into the fabric of society without testing it first. And that is dangerous. It's dangerous in how it programs people. It's dangerous in how it befriends people without being a real person. We've already seen suicides as a consequence. We see more disinformation, more radicalization. We think that absent any effective governance, regulation, or coordination on the AI space, because everyone's racing to take advantage of the staggering gains, that if there's a slowdown or there's a demand for profits, the people that are going to get hurt are the users, the consumer users, and that's what we see as the near-term risk.
Okay, we've spoken of the risks. At the end of this conversation, I want to speak of the red herrings, things that most people think are likely to happen, but you're actually thinking the probability of that happening. You think tariffs as a threat are overstated this year. You've also spoken about deglobalization being a red herring, and how this idea of the world getting divided into spheres of influence also is a red herring according to you. So try and explain why you think that tariffs, especially in the context of India, where do you think we are on that deal with the United States, which everyone says is around the corner, but nobody knows where this corner is?
Yeah. I mean, I know when Trump keeps adding things to the deal after you think it's done, most recently cutting off the energy that you're buying from the Russians, for example. But the Trump administration knows that affordability is a big issue in the U.S., and they know that tariffs are a component of that. So there is more incentive to get the deals done quickly. The Supreme Court's going to have the IEEPA ruling, which will probably constrain Trump's tariff capacity as the president to a degree. And he got hit back by the Chinese. So tariffs was the big story in 2025. It's less of a story in 2026. It's still meaningful. There's still historically high numbers, but not what it was in 2025. That's why he's turning to Donroe Doctrine with much more enthusiasm, as we see in the coming months. And also, this is linked to the U.S.-China detente, which we think will be more stable this year than it was for most.
What's your wager on the India-U.S. trade deal? Does it happen soon or not really?
Yeah. I think the U.S.-India trade deal happens in the first half of the year.
I enjoyed reading your report. I've enjoyed this conversation as well. You've been able to distill some of the risks that people should be looking out for. It's tough to try and put together a risk report, stick your neck out and say this is happening when you've got President Trump at the helm in DC. Is it the toughest time to be creating these reports? Because the US is essentially dismantling a system that the United States created over two centuries.
Indeed. Well, it helps that we've been doing it for 28 years now. I mean, I'm getting a little grayer, but so are you. That's okay. We'll see each other in Davos. I'm looking forward to it, man. It's always good talking to you.
Look forward to seeing you in Davos very soon. Thank you very much, Ian Bremmer, for taking out time for NDTV. Thank you.
Bye.
That was Ian Bremmer talking about the Global Risk Report. Elements which feel comic but aren't quite. These are the most definitive risks which will impact what happens in the world around us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We're slipping into a break. I'll have a lot more for you when we come back on the other side. Stay with us.
We love you, Rahman.
This was one of the most magical, mystical performances we've seen.
This is like a shrine.
Coming and listening to you is like seeing a maestro perform at that shrine.
I think it was when Air sang himself for the longest Qawwali. Yes, that for me was special.
When the first claps came in, I think my only prayers was all of you should be healed. May God give you a lot of prosperity, health, love, long life.
I was mesmerized. I think it is one of the most magical evenings that I've spent.
बहुत ही अच्छा.
Beautiful. Oh my God, Rahman is unmatchable.
It connected me to some spirituality.
This is India for me. This is India. This India I grew up, and this India I'm seeing now. It'll never change.
When you have somebody like an A.R. Rahman, legend, maestro, I don't know which word should we choose. It was just a treat.
Pulling us into this country.
They argue, I conclude. They deflect, I drill down. Stop. This isn't a free-for-all. It's a reckoning. No filler, no fog. Only the facts and where they lead. Every night at 9, the case closes because the buck stops here.
"21 days in Kashmir. People have bombarded me, friends, with requests for an unfiltered